It was during family dinner when my son slammed his fist on the table and shouted, "Dirty pig, give my wife your room or get out right now." The sound echoed through the dining room, bouncing off the walls that had once held laughter and warmth. His wife sat across from me, smirking, a glass of wine still in her hand. I looked at my son, the same boy I had carried in my arms, fed, protected and prayed for. But I didn't recognize the man in front of me. His face was red with anger, his voice full of pride. The food on the table grew cold, the air heavy with something far worse than shame. I didn't shout back. I didn't cry. I simply stood up, wiped my hands with the napkin, and said quietly, "If that's what you want, then so be it." Then I turned away, went to my room, and started packing my things. My heart was breaking, but my hands did not tremble. I had learned long ago that silence can speak louder than anger. As I folded the last piece of clothing into my suitcase, I heard laughter from the dining room. My son, my daughter-in-law, laughing at me, the woman who raised him alone after his father's death. I sat on the edge of my bed for a moment and took one deep breath. I looked around, at the walls covered with family photos, the curtains I had sewn myself, the small vase on the nightstand that still held my husband's memory. And I whispered to myself, "You built this home with love. Let them destroy it with greed if they wish. You're done begging for respect." That night, I didn't sleep. I listened to the ticking clock, counting each second that passed between pain and resolve. And by morning, I was gone. But what they didn't know was that my silence that night would become their biggest regret. If you believe no parent deserves humiliation under their own roof, stay until the end and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications. When my husband died 20 years ago, the world didn't stop spinning, but mine did. One morning he kissed me goodbye before work, and by sunset, a phone call changed everything. A car crash. Gone instantly. No last words. No chance to say goodbye. I remember sitting on the floor that night, holding his old jacket, the one that still smelled faintly of engine oil and soap. I made a promise to myself through tears. I would build a home strong enough to outlive sorrow, a home where love could breathe again. It took years of sacrifice to make that promise real. I worked 2 jobs, one as a school clerk during the day and another cleaning offices at night. I saved every naira, every little coin. I stopped buying new clothes, stopped visiting friends, and spent every weekend hauling cement and paint, supervising bricklayers who looked at me like a fragile widow who should have stayed quiet. But I didn't care what they thought. Every wall that went up, every nail hammered into place, was proof that I could stand again. When the house was finally done, I didn't cry. I smiled. A simple 2-story home with white walls, a red roof, and a garden filled with hibiscus and roses. I planted those flowers myself because my husband loved their color. The house sat near the edge of town, where the sea breeze carried a faint smell of salt in the evening. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Every tile, every window pane, every piece of furniture had a story. My son was my only child. I raised him alone after his father died. I poured everything I had into him: school fees, new shoes, good food, a safe home. I told myself he would one day understand the weight of what I carried to keep him fed and warm. He was kind as a boy, always hugging me before bed, always saying, "Don't worry, Mama. I'll take care of you someday." Those words used to bring me peace. I believed them, but life changes people in quiet ways. After university, my son moved to the city. He got married to a woman named Sandra, beautiful, confident, but sharp-tongued, the kind who never hid her thoughts, even when they cut deep. I tried to welcome her like a daughter. I even gave them money when they were struggling to pay rent. When my son lost his job, I invited them to move into my home, temporarily, until they found their feet again. I thought family was supposed to help one another. I didn't realize I was inviting disrespect under my own roof. At first, things seemed fine. I cooked, cleaned, and made sure they were comfortable. Every morning I prepared breakfast before they woke up, hot tea, boiled yam and stew. I washed their clothes, even their bed sheets, without complaint. I thought it was love. They thought it was duty. Sandra rarely said thank you. She walked around the house like she owned it, giving orders, rearranging my furniture, even changing the curtains I had chosen years ago. "These look old-fashioned," she said once, tossing them aside. My son stood there, silent. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself peace was more important than pride. But peace doesn't survive where respect is missing. One evening, I came home from the market and found Sandra sitting on my husband's chair in the living room, her feet on the table, scrolling through her phone. My son was next to her, laughing at something on TV. The dinner I had cooked was cold. "You're late," she said without looking up. "Next time, tell us if you'll be out so long." I looked at my son, hoping he'd say something, but he didn't. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, I felt my home slipping away from me. They stopped talking to me except when they wanted food or money. They took over my kitchen, moved their things into my storage room, and once Sandra even told a visitor that they owned the house. I laughed softly to myself when I heard it, but that laughter carried more pain than joy. I tried to set boundaries, but each time I did, I was called old-fashioned or too emotional. My son started snapping at me over small things, a misplaced towel, an unplugged fan, the sound of me praying too loudly at night. I stopped talking much. I started eating alone. I became a stranger in my own home. Still, I didn't throw them out. I couldn't. He was my son, my only child. Every time I saw him, I remembered the little boy who used to chase chickens in the yard, who once cried when I was sick. I kept hoping he would change, that maybe marriage or stress had hardened him, and one day he'd wake up and remember the woman who gave him everything. Then came the night that broke the silence. I had spent the whole afternoon cooking for the family, jollof rice, grilled fish, and fried plantain. The aroma filled the house, and for the first time in months, I felt a small spark of joy. I thought maybe a warm meal would bring us together again, even for one evening. We sat at the dining table. The lights were dim, the air still. I smiled faintly and said, "It's been a while since we ate like this." Sandra rolled her eyes. My son didn't respond. He kept eating quietly, his jaw tight, as if something was boiling inside him. Then he dropped his spoon and glared at me. He said, "Sandra's been uncomfortable since she moved here. She needs more space. We've decided she should have your room. You can move upstairs. Or better yet, maybe it's time you find somewhere else to stay." I stared at him, frozen. "My room?" I asked softly. "Yes," he snapped. "It's too big for one old woman. You'll be fine upstairs." Sandra smirked and took another bite of fish. "It's only fair," she said. "You've had it for years." My heart pounded so loudly that I could barely hear my own breathing. I looked around the table, the same table my husband built with his own hands, now turned into a stage for humiliation. The food I cooked was no longer food. It was ashes in my mouth. I wanted to cry, but the tears refused to fall. Then he shouted, that word I never thought I'd hear from my own son. "Dirty pig, give my wife your room or get out right now." The sound cracked the air like thunder. The spoon fell from my hand. For a long moment, nobody moved. I looked into his eyes and saw no trace of the boy I once knew. So I stood up, slowly, quietly. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I went to my room, closed the door, and began to pack. Every item I placed in my suitcase carried a memory. My husband's old photograph, my wedding ring, the small Bible by my bedside. I wasn't running away. I was walking toward peace, and as I zipped my bag, I said to myself, "This house was built with love, but love no longer lives here." But one dinner changed everything. Would you keep helping people who treat you like a stranger in your own home? The night started like any other, quiet, almost peaceful. I had made a simple meal of rice and stew. The air smelled of tomatoes, pepper, and thyme. I wanted that dinner to be calm. No arguments, no tension. I thought maybe for once we would eat like a family again. Sandra came down the stairs wearing a silk robe, her hair tied in a perfect bun. My son followed behind her, his eyes glued to his phone. They sat across from me without a word. The sound of the spoon against the plate was the only thing filling the silence. I tried to make small talk. I added more spice today. You both like it that way. Sandra didn't look up. The rice is cold, she said flatly. I swallowed my words and smiled. I'll warm it. No need, she replied, her tone sharp. I'm already eating it. I wanted to believe she was tired. Maybe she had a long day. But then she leaned back in her chair and said, You know, this house is too small for 3 adults. We need more space. My spoon paused mid-air. More space? I asked quietly. She nodded. Yes. Your room is the biggest. It has the best light and the balcony. I think it makes sense that we move in there. You can take the smaller room upstairs. I stared at her. For a moment, I thought I misheard. My room? I asked. She smiled. It's not personal. It's just practical. You're old. You don't need all that space. My son didn't even look up from his plate. I waited for him to speak. To say something. Anything. But he stayed quiet, chewing slowly, as if the conversation didn't involve me at all. Finally, I said, Sandra, that room holds memories. Your father-in-law built that space with his hands. It's not about size. It's about what it means. She rolled her eyes. Meaning doesn't pay rent, Mama. We're a young couple. We deserve comfort too. The words hit like small stones, one after another. I turned to my son again, praying for a sign of sense or respect. But he put his fork down and looked straight at me. His eyes were cold. She's right, he said. You've lived here long enough. Let us enjoy it too. Or maybe... He leaned forward. Maybe it's time you find somewhere else to stay. You could move to Auntie Grace's place for a while. The room fell silent. I felt the air grow heavy. I tried to keep my voice steady. This is my home, I said. Your father and I built this house with our sweat. I opened my doors when you were struggling. You think I deserve to be pushed aside like a visitor? He smirked, a look I had never seen on his face before. You're overreacting, he said. Don't make this a drama. Sandra laughed softly. She likes playing victim. That was the moment something inside me broke. The years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of working my fingers raw, all reduced to mockery. I stood up slowly. I will not argue in my house, I said. But before I could take another breath, my son slammed his fist on the table. Dirty pig, he shouted. Give my wife your room or get out right now. The sound echoed through the house. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. I looked at him, my child, my only child, and for the first time, I saw a stranger. Sandra froze. Even she didn't expect him to go that far. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I took my plate, cleared it from the table, and walked toward the kitchen. The sound of my footsteps was the only noise in the room. I rinsed my plate, placed it on the rack, and wiped my hands dry. Then I turned to them and said, Eat well. It's the last meal I'll ever cook in this house. Neither of them spoke. My son's hand still rested on the table, knuckles pale from the blow he had struck against the wood. I could feel their eyes on me as I climbed the stairs, but I didn't look back. That silence scared them, but not for long. They thought I was defeated. They thought they had won. But that night, my quiet was louder than any words I could have said. I didn't sleep that night. The words kept echoing in my head. Dirty pig. They came from the same mouth I once fed, the same voice that used to call me Mama with pride. Every corner of the house felt smaller. The walls that once protected me now felt like they were pushing me out. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the photo on the nightstand. It was me and my late husband, Joseph. He had built this house with his bare hands, brick by brick, day after day. He used to say, "This home will always have peace, no matter who lives here." That night, I realized peace had already left. The house was quiet. I could hear the clock ticking in the living room. Midnight, then 1, then 2. I didn't cry. I was done crying. I had given all my tears to people who no longer valued me. I stood up and opened my wardrobe. I took out a small travel bag and began folding my clothes, neatly, one by one. A few dresses, a sweater, my scarf. Then I reached for the family photos, the ones that mattered. My wedding picture, my son's graduation, our last Christmas together before his father died. I held that one a bit longer. Then I turned to the portrait of Joseph on the wall. His smile looked calm, almost reassuring. I whispered, "You'd be disappointed in him, I know. But I'll do what you taught me, walk away before bitterness grows." I took the portrait down carefully and laid it flat in my bag. My heart felt heavier than the suitcase itself. By 4 a.m. the sky outside was still dark. I walked through the house slowly, memorizing every sound. The creak of the stairs, the hum of the old fridge, the faint smell of paint and wood polish. My whole life lived in those details. When I reached the dining table, I stopped. The same table where they insulted me hours earlier. My son's plate was still there, half-eaten food, a glass tipped on its side. I pulled out a sheet of paper from the notepad near the phone and wrote, in simple words, "Respect is worth more than any roof." I placed the note under my house keys and left them right in the center of the table. I didn't leave a forwarding address, didn't leave a message. I didn't even lock the door behind me. I wanted them to know that the house they wanted so badly meant nothing without the soul that kept it warm. As I stepped outside, the air was cool. The dawn light brushed the sky, soft and pale. My old car waited in the driveway, a small sedan Joseph had given me before he passed. It coughed a little before starting, as if sharing my hesitation. I looked back at the house one last time. My home, my memories, my pain. And then I drove away without looking back again. That morning, I didn't know where I was going, but I knew where I wasn't staying. I reached the outskirts of town by sunrise. The ocean wasn't far from there, a place Joseph and I used to visit when life felt too heavy. The sound of the waves always gave me peace, so I drove toward the sea. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have anyone waiting for me. I only had my freedom, and after everything, that was enough. The next time they saw me, I was standing in front of something they could never buy. The sea became my new neighbor. The sound of waves replaced the noise of arguments. The morning breeze carried salt instead of bitterness. For the first time in years, I felt my lungs fill with peace. The house wasn't big, a modest 2-bedroom cottage by the shore. Its paint was faded, and the fence leaned slightly to one side. But when I first stepped inside, I smiled. It felt honest, quiet, mine. I used my savings and pension to pay for it in full. No loans, no debts, no one's name but mine on the papers. I signed the final document with a steady hand and whispered to myself, "Freedom bought fair and clean." The first night there, I slept with the windows open. I listened to the waves crash softly against the rocks, and for once, I didn't wake up to doors slamming or raised voices, only silence, gentle and kind. Every morning after that began the same way. I'd boil water for tea, step outside with my cup, and watch the sun rise over the horizon. The sea glittered like it was alive. I didn't need anyone to tell me good morning. The world did it for me. I started cooking again, but this time for myself. I didn't have to ask what anyone wanted for breakfast. I fried eggs the way I liked them, crisp edges, soft middle, and I ate them while humming to the radio. Slowly, the house began to change. I painted the walls white and hung my late husband's portrait in the living room, right above the window facing the ocean. I planted flowers in the front yard, hibiscus and marigold. I wanted color, life, and things that didn't talk back. In the evenings, I'd sit on the porch and watch children run along the beach. Sometimes they waved. Sometimes they stopped to ask about my flowers. One little girl brought me seashells, saying, "They sound like the sea." I gave her cookies in return. It was simple, human, good. I learned that peace isn't the absence of people, it's the presence of self-respect. At night, I'd write in my journal. I wrote about the years I had given away and how little they were appreciated. I wrote about my husband and how proud he would have been to see me standing strong. I wrote about my son, not in anger, but in understanding. People lose their way when they stop being grateful. Days turned into weeks. The loneliness I feared never came. Instead, I felt light, like I'd finally stepped out of a cage I didn't know I was in. And then, one afternoon, as I watered my flowers, the radio played a familiar voice, a news segment about a local business going bankrupt. The owner's name? My son's. I froze. I turned up the volume. The reporter said the company had been struggling with unpaid bills, bad investments, and lawsuits. His wife's name came up too. She had posted pictures online of their perfect home. But in reality, they were drowning in debt. I put the watering can down and sat on the porch. The irony didn't make me smile. It made me sigh. Life has a way of returning lessons to those who refuse to learn them. Meanwhile, I whispered to myself, their lives are falling apart, one bill at a time. And as the wind picked up and the sea roared louder, I realized something beautiful. Peace doesn't always come wrapped in comfort. Sometimes it arrives after you've walked away from everything that once chained you. The sea has a way of speaking to you if you listen long enough. Some mornings it's calm and forgiving. Other days, it crashes hard, as if reminding you that nothing in life stays still for too long. It was on one of those mornings that I began hearing whispers about my son and his wife. News travels fast, even to quiet places. The grocer mentioned they'd stopped coming to town. The neighbor who helped me fix my gate said he saw them arguing outside their home. I nodded politely and kept quiet, though deep down I already knew where the road they chose would lead. My son had once been a good man, kind, respectful, and hard-working. But after his marriage, pride crept in like rot in wood. He started showing up late to work, blaming traffic, headaches, or bad luck. His wife didn't help. She demanded more than they could afford: jewelry, expensive clothes, new furniture. Every month, their expenses grew while their savings disappeared. One of his old friends called me by mistake one afternoon. He didn't realize I was on the line when he said, "That woman is bleeding him dry. He's drinking every night now." I said nothing. I only thanked him and hung up. I thought of the dinner table where my son had once shouted at me, the same table he'd slammed his fist on while calling me a dirty pig. Now I imagined him sitting there alone, surrounded by bills, wondering where it all went wrong. They had stopped paying for maintenance on the house. Paint peeled off the walls. The roof leaked during rain. Neighbors complained about loud arguments at night, the kind where you can hear both rage and regret in every word. I tried not to feel satisfaction. I told myself it wasn't my place to rejoice in their suffering, but I won't lie, there was a quiet justice in watching life hand them the same disrespect they once handed me. My son eventually lost his job. He was called into the office after showing up drunk 3 times in 1 month. The company couldn't tolerate it anymore. He came home that day and told his wife, but instead of sympathy, she shouted at him, "You're useless. I should have never married you." The neighbors heard everything. The next morning, she packed her things and left. No goodbye, no note, just silence. It didn't take long before debt collectors started showing up. The house that once felt too small for me suddenly felt too big for him. Friends stopped visiting. Even his in-laws refused to answer his calls. I was sitting by my window one afternoon, sipping tea and watching the tide roll in, when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I hesitated, then answered. "Good afternoon," a polite voice said. "Is this Mrs. Daniels?" "Yes," I replied. "This is Mr. Harris from First City Bank. We're contacting you regarding your son, David." My heart tightened. What about him? "I'm afraid your son used your name as guarantor for a loan 2 years ago. He hasn't made payments in several months. We tried reaching him, but his number is disconnected." I gripped the phone tighter. My name, my credit, my trust. Used without permission. The man continued. "We wanted to confirm if you'd be willing to discuss repayment terms, since the debt legally falls under your responsibility as guarantor." I didn't answer immediately. I looked out the window at the waves, calm and endless. My son had stolen my dignity once. Now he had tried to steal my peace. After a long pause, I said, "Send me the paperwork. I'll take care of what's mine, but only what's mine." That night, I sat at my kitchen table, reading every document carefully. His signature, my forged one beneath it. My chest felt heavy, but not from sorrow, from resolve. I realized the world has a balance. You can't humiliate others and expect grace forever. Sooner or later, pride comes to collect its debt. As I folded the papers back into the envelope, I whispered to myself, "The downfall has begun." But deep inside, I knew this was not the end. Something bigger was coming. Then one day I received a call, not from my son, but from the bank. The morning the call came, the sea was quiet, the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. I was sitting on my porch, watering the flowers, when my phone rang again. It was the same number that had called days earlier, the bank. "Mrs. Daniels," the voice said, polite but tense. "We're reaching out to inform you that your son's property is now under foreclosure. He hasn't made any payments in 6 months." I set the watering can down and listened. The man continued. "Unfortunately, since your name was used as a guarantor, the system automatically flags your profile as a secondary contact. We need to verify some ownership details." My hands went cold. "I never signed to guarantee anything for him," I said quietly. "I understand," he replied, "but our records show your name and signature on the loan agreement." I asked them to send a copy. When I received the email, I stared at the screen. My name was there. My signature too, except it wasn't mine. He had forged it. My own son had signed my name to secure his debt. For a long time, I couldn't move. The sound of the ocean faded. The room felt heavier. I thought about the day he was born, the small hands that once clung to me, the first words he ever spoke, the man he had become. Then I called the bank back. "This is Mrs. Daniels again," I said firmly. "That signature is forged. I have my property documents, and I'd like to meet in person." We met 2 days later at the local branch. The manager, a composed woman with sharp eyes, greeted me politely. "I understand this is a sensitive issue," she said. "If you have proof, we'll open an internal investigation." I placed a brown folder on her desk. Inside were the original house deeds, the purchase receipt, and old bank statements. I explained that I had never authorized any loan or guarantor agreement. She reviewed them carefully. "These are authentic," she said. "If what you're saying is true, then your son could face legal consequences for forgery." I nodded. "I don't want to ruin him. I just want the truth to stand." She sighed. "Mrs. Daniels, the truth will stand. It always does." 3 weeks later, the investigation ended. The bank confirmed the forgery. The loan was declared invalid under my name. The assets, my son's house, car, and accounts, were seized to recover what was owed. The next day, my son and his wife showed up at my seaside home. They looked nothing like the proud couple who once shouted at me across the dinner table. His shoulders were slumped, eyes hollow. She clung to him, mascara smudged, voice trembling. "Mom," he said softly, "we lost everything." I didn't respond. I only stepped aside, letting the wind speak for me. His wife spoke next. "We have nowhere else to go. Please let us stay, just until we get back on our feet." I looked at her, the same woman who once smirked as her husband insulted me, who demanded I give up my room because hers wasn't big enough. Now she was begging for space in a home she never built, under a roof her pride once mocked. "I'm sorry," I said calmly. "This house has only one rule, peace, and peace doesn't share walls with people who broke it." She tried to argue, but I raised my hand. "You both made your choices. Now you must live with them." For a moment, my son's face twisted with anger, the same defiance I'd seen before. But it faded quickly. He dropped his gaze and nodded. "I understand," he said quietly. They turned and walked back to their car. I watched as they drove off, dust rising behind them. When the sound of the engine faded, I sat on the porch and exhaled. The sea roared again, loud, alive and free. For years, I had been the one holding everything together, the house, the family, the peace. But that day, I realized something. Letting go is also an act of love. Not for them, but for myself. They had come to me not out of love, but desperation. They wanted shelter, not reconciliation. And as the sun set, painting the horizon gold, I whispered to myself, "You don't owe anyone your peace, not even your children." That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. They came to me, not for love, but for shelter. The knock came just before sunset. 3 slow, tired thuds against the door. I was in the kitchen, making tea, when I heard it. For a moment I thought it was the wind, but then it came again, weak, hesitant. When I opened the door, I froze. My son stood there, thin and unshaven, clothes rumpled and dusty. His wife stood behind him, clutching a torn handbag, eyes red from crying. They looked nothing like the proud couple who once demanded I give up my room. He tried to smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "Mom," he said quietly, voice trembling, "we have nowhere to go." The silence between us stretched long. I looked at him, then at her. Their faces told me everything: the eviction, the shame, the long walk of defeat. I stepped aside slowly, letting the wind drift through the open doorway. "You told me to get out of my house," I said evenly. "Now you know what that feels like." His head dropped. He didn't speak. His wife wiped her eyes, whispering, "We made mistakes. We didn't mean what we said." I took a slow sip of tea, letting the warmth settle in my chest. "You meant every word," I replied. "People show their truth when they think they don't need you." He opened his mouth, then stopped. His hands were shaking. "Mom, I'm sorry." Those words hung in the air. For years I'd waited to hear them, or maybe I'd stopped waiting. I searched his face for the boy I once raised, the one who used to hold my hand when crossing the street. What I saw instead was a broken man standing in the ruins of his own pride. I should have turned him away. Every memory told me to, but something inside me hesitated. "You look hungry," I said finally. "There's food inside." He nodded, eyes glistening, and they stepped in quietly. I set 2 extra plates on the table. No words were spoken as we ate, only the sound of forks against ceramic, and the ocean breathing through the window. When the meal ended, he stood. "We'll find a place tomorrow," he said. "We don't want to be a burden." I looked at him and saw something I hadn't seen in years: remorse. Real, heavy, human remorse. The kind that doesn't ask for forgiveness, but quietly accepts its debt. For a long moment, no one moved. Then I said, "You'll sleep on the couch tonight." He nodded. His wife whispered, "Thank you." I didn't respond. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed. Outside, the waves crashed softly, steady and sure, a reminder that time erases many things, but never truth. I lay down that night knowing forgiveness was not weakness. It was strength, the kind that chooses peace even after being broken. But peace doesn't forget, and I wondered if he truly understood that. But then I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years: remorse. They slept under my roof again, but everything had changed. The house was quiet that night. The air smelled of the sea and salt, but also of memory. I could still see it clearly that night at the dinner table, when my son slammed his fist and shouted at me. The same table, the same meal. Except this time he sat in silence, eyes fixed on his plate. His wife avoided my gaze. She sat small, shoulders hunched, her usual confidence gone. The woman who once demanded my room now looked like she wanted to disappear. I cooked their favorite dish, rice, stew, and fried plantain, the same meal I had made the night they insulted me. Every motion felt deliberate. The chopping, the stirring, the serving. It wasn't about food. It was about facing the ghosts we created. When I placed the plates in front of them, neither spoke. My son muttered, "Thank you, Mum," barely above a whisper. His wife nodded, her eyes red. We ate in silence. The sound of waves outside was louder than our words. I didn't lecture them. I didn't ask for explanations. The shame in that room spoke louder than anything I could ever say. When the dishes were cleared, I said quietly, "You'll leave in the morning." He nodded slowly. "I understand." I went to bed early, but I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if forgiveness meant letting people back into your life, or simply freeing yourself from their hold. At dawn, I woke up and walked to the living room. The couch was empty. The blanket folded neatly. They were gone. But on the dining table, where I'd left their plates the night before, there was a folded piece of paper. My name was written on it in shaky handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. The next morning, she left a note on my table. The next morning, she left a note on my table. The morning after they spent the night, I woke up to silence. No movement. No sound of dishes clattering or voices arguing. For a moment, I thought they had already gone. But when I stepped into the living room, I saw the note, folded neatly and placed on the same table where I once left my house keys behind. It read, "You were right. Peace isn't in a room, it's in respect. I destroyed mine, chasing comfort I didn't earn. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope one day..." You'll remember the woman I tried to be, not the one I became. It was signed by my daughter-in-law. There was no dramatics, no tear stains on the paper, only a simple truth written with a shaky hand. I read it twice, then placed it in the drawer beside my bed. Something inside me softened. Not forgiveness yet, but understanding. Sometimes pain teaches faster than punishment. By the time I went outside, the car was gone. Only my son's jacket hung by the fence. That evening, as the sun dipped below the ocean, I sat on the porch and whispered a prayer, not for revenge, but for direction. I wanted peace more than anything. 2 days later, as I was sweeping the veranda, I heard footsteps on the gravel. When I turned, I saw him, my son, alone. No car, no bags, just the same jacket he had left behind. His face looked older, heavier. The arrogance was gone. "She left," he said quietly, stopping a few feet away. "She said she couldn't stay after what we did to you." For a while, neither of us spoke. The waves filled the silence. I didn't ask where he'd been or what he'd eaten. I didn't scold him or open my arms. I simply pointed to the bench and said, "Sit. You look tired." That was the beginning of something neither of us expected. Slow, quiet healing. He found a job the next week at a small shop near the dock. It didn't pay much, but it gave him something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. Every morning he left before sunrise, carrying a paper bag of food I packed for him. He never asked for anything more. In the evenings, he came home with blisters on his palms and stories about people who worked hard but complained less. I listened. Sometimes I smiled. Other times, I said nothing. Healing doesn't always need words. Sometimes silence is enough. He started fixing things around the house on his own. The broken fence, the leaking tap, the old chairs his father once built. He even replanted the flowers I had given up on when I left my old home. Every nail he drove in, every weed he pulled out, felt like a quiet apology. Not through words, but through effort. One afternoon while I was folding laundry, I found his phone on the table. The screen was cracked, but a message from an unknown number was open. It read, "You'll regret walking away." I closed it. I didn't need to ask. Some lessons life teaches without interference. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, we became a family again, smaller but stronger. He talked about the past less and about the future more. About saving to buy a small boat. About wanting to build something of his own one day. Then one morning, as I was tending to the garden, I heard his voice behind me. "Mom," he said softly, "I made something for you." When I turned, he was holding a small wooden box. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside was a simple locket, carved by hand, rough around the edges, but polished with care. When I opened it, I froze. Inside was an old photo of me and his late father, taken the year we built our first home together. He looked down and said, "Dad would never forgive me for how I treated you, but I hope you still can." I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, and before I realized it, tears fell down my cheeks. I reached out and touched his hand. "Forgiveness," I said quietly, "isn't forgetting what happened. It's choosing peace over pain. And I've had enough pain." He nodded, eyes red, shoulders shaking. I pulled him close and whispered, "Let's start again." For the first time in years, the house by the sea felt whole. Not perfect, but peaceful. Then one morning, he handed me something that brought tears to my eyes. The sun was barely rising when I heard the door creak open. My son stood there, still in his work clothes, holding something behind his back. His face carried a calm I hadn't seen since he was a boy. The kind of peace that comes only after you've faced your worst self and lived to change it. He walked toward me slowly and said, "I wanted to give you something." He handed me a framed photo. At first, I thought it was an old picture, but when I looked closer, I realized he had taken it himself. It was the sunrise over the sea, the view from my porch. The same view I had stared at alone for months after leaving the house I built. Below the picture, in his handwriting, were the words, "Home isn't where we live, Mum. It's who we become." I felt my chest tighten. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The same son who once shouted at me, who called me names no mother deserves to hear, now stood before me humbled, holding a symbol of everything we had both learned. I touched the frame gently and smiled. "You've grown," I said quietly. He nodded. "You were right to walk away," he said. "You taught me that love without respect is nothing. I thought comfort meant control, but I lost everything chasing it. Thank you for not saving me when I didn't deserve it." Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't cry from pain this time. It was relief. The kind that comes when a heavy door finally closes behind you. I reached out and hugged him. "You don't owe me thanks," I said. "Just never forget the lesson." We stood there for a long time, the morning light spilling through the windows, the waves whispering softly in the background. The house that once echoed with loneliness now felt alive again, not because of luxury or family titles, but because of truth. I forgave him that morning, fully. Not because he had paid enough, but because holding on to bitterness would only chain me to the past. Forgiveness wasn't about freeing him. It was about freeing myself. He visits often now, not out of guilt, but love. We eat simple meals, laugh quietly, and sometimes talk about his father, the man who would have been proud to see his son finally learn what being a man truly means. I hung the framed photo in my living room, right above the window facing the sea. Every morning when I wake up, I look at those words. Home isn't where we live, it's who we become. And I remember that peace begins the moment you stop begging for respect and start demanding it through your actions. My son once called me a dirty pig and threw me out of my own home, but life taught him what real home means and taught me that peace begins when you stop begging for respect. If you believe dignity is worth more than comfort, like and subscribe for more stories of truth, strength, and self-respect.